Okay, this is a Small Business Solutions Series workshop, developing your marketing plan for 2023. And let me get this off my screen. Today, by the way, my name is Henry Benitez, and I'm part of the Small Business Entrepreneurial Council, which is part of the Washington County Chamber of Commerce, which is sponsoring this series. And today's topic will be developing your marketing plan for 2023. So I would like to first introduce our sponsor for today's meeting, which is American Family Insurance. And I believe our representative is Jake Mead. I do not see him on the call, but maybe Deanna, you can say a few things about American Family Insurance.
Absolutely. I would say a few things about Jake Mead, and he is sponsoring the entire series of our Small Business Solution Series for 2023. Jake is a diamond level leading investor for the Washington County Chamber. We're very grateful for his investment and support of the Chamber. If you have any insurance needs, I know that there are a lot of people on this call that will be a testimonial to the fact that Jake will treat you right, treat you fairly, and provide you exemplary customer service. So again, if you need any support or services, Jake can hook you up. So be sure and reach out to him.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jake, for this sponsorship. So now I'll just read a short bio on Mr. Will Eberhardt from Perseverance Marketing. Mr. Eberhardt is a passionate strategic brand marketer with demonstrated success, driving brand awareness, engaging consumers, and directly influencing revenue. His resume boasts some of the world's best-known consumer brands, having played a key role in accelerating growth on their behalf. As a business leader, Mr. Eberhardt is invested and relentlessly consumer-focused. He strives to build and motivate teams with consistently demonstrate curiosity, competitiveness, creativity, and a cooperative spirit as they knock it out of the park with results. Mr. Eberhardt's success can be contributed to growing up in the heyday of the New York City crack era, where life was not only bleak, but it was also not guaranteed. Overcoming everyday obstacles to reach a basic level of existence built a resolve he carries today. So I quote Mr. Eberhardt, "I am truly an anomaly in that regard. To many, I am the picture of success. To others, I am the one of the lucky ones who made it. Ultimately, I am one of many shining examples of hope, encouragement, and perseverance." So with that, I introduce Mr. Will Eberhardt.
Henry, thank you so much for the warm introduction. And SBE, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm going to share screen. Let's see, here we go. And get play. So I'm sure everyone can see that. Perfect. All right. I am going to do something a little different. I see a lot of familiar faces, and the last thing I want to do is just preach to you, where it's just me constantly talking and not, just me talking for a half hour. And of course, as I say that, we jump ahead. So a little bit about me. My name is Will Eberhardt. I am from the city of New York. I hold that dear because, as my bio says, as Henry read, I grew up during a time where authenticity mattered. If I pretended to be something else other than I was, the penalty could often be extreme violence or death. So for me, it always mattered for me to be myself in every situation. Don't pretend to be someone I'm not. Don't belittle myself as well, right? Don't quell to or shrink myself in the face of others. Who am I? I'm a son. I'm a father. Those three things I hold dear. I hold near and dear to me. They mean the world to me. My sons are young men in their teens. One is exiting his teen years or just coming into adulthood. He'll be 21 next month. The other one is just getting started. He'll be 15 next month. And some of the things that drive me outside of family and my origin are basketball, sport. I have a love of sport. I grew up playing basketball. I eat, breathe, and live basketball. Basketball taught me how to get along with others, with differing interests. It also helped me kick off my interests along that with the love of my parents who pushed me into different things. So as you see here, what means the world to me besides family and where I'm from are the sports and the activities that I participate in. I have a love of photography. I hate running. So the bicycle is what's important to me. It's what's the necessary evil. Golf. Basketball now hurts to play, but golf is a lovely game. Unfortunately, golf doesn't love me as much as I love it. Education is huge, and cooking is a necessity. I have a love of food and not so much eating it. I won't solely eating it, but also just, figuring out how things are made, different cultures, how they make theirs, their key staples, scuba diving, and I have a love of world travel, which all of these things culminate into me being the person that I am, right? Authenticity is key. When I go abroad, when I travel somewhere, I'm not looking for something I'm comfortable with or I'm familiar with. I'm looking for something new that I can learn, going back to the education piece, going back to the authentic piece. I want to learn what's authentic to the environment in which I'm in. It's the same way that I approach business. So how does all this translate? As you think about business, many people, and what I'm going to do is I want people to unmute or use the chat, and discuss. I want to have an open discussion. Again, I don't want to preach to you. I want to make sure that we're discussing as if this was a fireside chat. It's raining here in Oregon and a fireplace should be on because it's probably about 46 degrees and gray, but let's have a conversation. I don't want to just, talk down. Let's talk amongst ourselves. So I like to start here, right? Every business has a root cause and a reason as to why it was started. Many of you are business owners. You started your business for a reason, and it was probably just your idea, or someone encouraged you. But the further you move away from starting your business, the more convoluted your message begins to grow. You start thinking about all the things that you think would make sense to the world outside, or you believe make sense to you. And when you move away from those core basics, you start to cloud your messaging. People stop understanding what it is that you're doing or why you're doing it. So I am a firm believer in Simon Sinek's Start With Why. Remember why you built your business in the first place. Keep that near and dear and then grow outwardly from there with that as your foundation. That driving passion that kept you up at night, or if you're like me, when you have a good idea, brings a tear to your eye. There are many occasions where I'm like, oh, this is a winner. And uncontrollably, I start to shed a tear. Yep, I know my voice says I don't cry, but that isn't true. It's not the case. I cry, not often, but when something moves me, I allow it to take over. So start with why, right? And as you start with why, that will help inform everything that you do, because your why is your authentic piece, your authentic reasoning statement or selling statement. Your unique selling proposition is what many people call it, right? That's your why. And it may change over time, but as it changes, it only grows and stems from the origin. So first up, and here we go. This is our first portion of the interactive piece. Can anyone tell me what this is?
It's a hamburger.
It is. McDonald's, right? Instantaneously, you recognize. You don't need any words. You don't need any identifiers other than you know that's a signature burger from McDonald's. How about this?
Porsche.
Huh?
Oh, he's talking about the 3 coffees with the hamburger.
Oh, I was looking at the next slide over. Yeah.
You guys can see that? You're not supposed to see that screen.
Yeah, I just sent you a message in chat, Will.
I didn't see it. Let me and of course, here we go. Let's adjust this. Let's see. Oh my goodness. I don't know which screen is sharing, which is crazy. Deanna, I told you. Here we go.
I think those were actually Insomnia coffee. That's my vote. Insomnia.
Insomnia, Dutch Brothers. It's important.
That was a tough one. I didn't think that would be that tough. Let's get this here. Should have done a test run. But, all right. Here we go. Desktop 2. That's what you see. What does everyone see?
Burger.
Only the burger. Okay. Not the other screen.
Nope.
Perfect. All right. Now, I heard Insomnia. I heard a couple of others. That's a tough one.
Different sizes.
Definitely different sizes. If it was a green label on it, you'd probably recognize it.
Oh, yeah.
How about this?
Oh, yeah.
Tesla. Anybody? What's the tail of the tape here? AirPods. So Apple, right?
Yeah.
That was an easy one. So we didn't need this one.
Ooh, Apple. Macintosh.
So what about this? Kleenex. So again, synonymous brands, and this is what I want to talk to you about. Synonymous brands that need no identifying markers in order to educate their audience or to alert their audience as to who they are. Even as far as you heard it, Kleenex. Kleenex is a brand that has surpassed not only its own categorization or identifying market adjective, it's also culminated every facial tissue we've ever seen into claiming that it is a particular brand, right? We didn't say facial tissue, we said Kleenex. Kleenex is the brand, Kleenex is not the item, right? So as you start to think about how these companies are able to do this, how these companies are able to create these signifying identifiers that have now programmed or trained the consumer to say, oh yeah, this is what it is, right? And it goes back to what their authentic purpose was. What did they do that led them to build such a level of trust in their audience, where their audience takes on an entirely different meaning of what everything associated with that product is. Now, for Apple and Steve Jobs, it was the idea of being irreverent. Yes, it started in a garage, right, with 2 college dropouts, but they didn't want to do what Microsoft was doing. They didn't want everyone to be part of their journey. They wanted to do something that was totally outside the box to challenge the status quo. What can we do that challenges how everyone thinks and how everyone believes? Adversely, it works where everyone wanted to be part of this thing that they weren't included in. And so you start to see the brand itself take on its own identity and now has become part of the fashion forward fabric, or streetwear, even, if you will, where people are now dressing according to not only the device, what they're wearing, but also the devices they're using. They're part of this, I don't want to say cult, but they're part of this larger organization or organisms, this group of organisms that identify with trust, and pristine value for what they're doing. Nike is no different, right? If you have an athlete, if you have a body, you are an athlete. The idea of them innovating, they're always pushing innovation. So every 2 years or every year, something comes out where they're saying to you, hey, you're getting closer to walking on air. Here's this thing you need that's going to help you perform. And if you're not performing, don't worry about it because you also look good doing so. McDonald's, yes, they're in the hamburger business, but truthfully, they're in the real estate business, right? McDonald's tried to figure out how to make money off the land that they were acquiring and had people come and pay for it in its own right. And so we get into the Teslas. Yes, it's an identifying marker. 10 years ago, we're in Oregon. We know going to Washington Square when Tesla had a kiosk and there was no charging station for 100 miles around. There was no possible way to drive from Portland to Seattle without having to make a stop in Idaho first, right? So there are these brands, Google. We associate Google with everything. When you want to look something up, what do? You say you Google it. You don't say you Yahoo it. You don't say I Bing it. You Google it. No matter what search engine you use, you still refer to them all as Google, right? These are these propositions, these commanding propositions where the company has led with what their intrinsic idea is first, the thing that matters most to them. So as you go to start building your website, and we see it again with BMW, the ultimate driving machine, Chanel, these logos are instantaneously recognizable for their audiences. And we trust them. We trust them to deliver the thing they say they can. Apple, am I going to get the best product in the world? Am I going to get something that is going to work and be efficient for me? Yes, I am. McDonald's, the hamburger hasn't changed. It's tried and true. Henry called it out. You know it right away before you don't have to smell it. As soon as you see it, oh, that's a McDonald's hamburger. And the same goes across the board, right? So as you're building your business, as you're building your business plan, your marketing plan, what is the number one thing you need? Well, you obviously need to be in business, but you need to take care of your second employee. Who's your second employee? Your website. Why? Your website is the employee that works for you 24/7, 365, plus one on a leap year. This is the one-stop place where you don't have to do anything because you've done all the work up front, and now you're relying on your employee to make sure it translates the conversions or it transfers the conversions. And how do you do that? What do you want your employee to do? Number one, you want people visiting the employee number two to know who you are. When they come to your website, they should absolutely get an idea of who you are. They should understand what you do. And then they should know what you want them to do upon visiting your site. If they get to your site, they see who you are and they see what you do, but you're not instructing them as to what to do next. It's the same as if you were running a retail location and people walked in and they say, oh, this is great. It's Foot Locker. They have sneakers. And no one comes over to help you. No one comes over to assist you. So your employee number two on your website is that it's the greeter. Hey, by the way, before you go, check this out, or get on our calendar to do X, Y, and Z. And then as they come into the store, they should understand how they should be able to picture themselves, to see themselves within the confines of your business, to understand how you can help them. So it's not so much about you anymore, right? It's about the consumer. It's about how people receive your business, how they understand how they fit within the role of your business. Authenticity is key. The proof is in the pudding. You are the expert. We believe you. Show of hands. Anybody ever go to the doctor's office and ask, hey, how many degrees you have? What medical school did you go to? How many clinical hours have you done? No, you don't ask, because when you go into the doctor's office, you're already trusting that they are the expert, that you're there because you know that they're there to help you. They have the ability to help you. So speak to your audience in layman's terms. They weren't with you in school. They weren't with you in that 1,000-hour certificate program or your C++ or whatever you're doing. They don't understand the things that you understand. You know who does? your colleagues, those people who were there with you. And if that's your consumer, then by all means, fine. But for the most part, the consumer is coming to you, your client is coming to you because they trust that you know what you're doing. They trust that you have the capability to manage their business or to help them with their need. So speaking to them in terms that they can understand is going to help you readily identify with what their needs are and have them understand you, build trust, right? Building that authenticity. Lastly, fish where the fish are. You're looking for clients. How do you identify your audience? Where do you go? Where do you go to identify your audience? If you're in burger sales, you probably don't want to go to a vegan restaurant and try to pitch them on your idea, right? So please always keep in mind understanding where your consumer is, who your consumer is, and how you're going to communicate with them, right? Those three things. Messaging is key. As you go through this, assess the competition. Now, this doesn't mean, you have to also understand who your competition is. As a small business owner, your competition is probably not the company that has your entire budget, probably 10x, to spend on marketing dollars. It's not your competition, right? If you're a massage therapist, Massage Envy probably isn't your competition. But the other massage therapist down the block, the other body worker around the corner probably is. What is the price to value ratio they're offering compared to you, right? A comparative price analysis is key and important to understanding how you're building your marketing plan. Don't price yourself out of the market, but also don't underprice yourself. And in order to do that, you have to get an idea of what's going on around you, what's happening in your neighborhood. Road mapping. Where are you going? Where would you like to go? Building a plan is all about the destination. But short of the destination are the goals and the stops to get there. I used the Tesla example. I think it was 2012 where it was 11 years ago, where I walked into the Tesla kiosk next to the Apple store and said, hey, this is great. How do I get to Seattle if I'm only getting 100 miles to the tank or to the charge? And the gentleman said, well, you probably have to head to Spokane, and then from Spokane, go over to Idaho, and then from Idaho, go to... And I was like, well, how do I get home? It's like, this is a 3-hour trip that we've now made 11 hours. That was 10 years ago. That was a decade ago. However, that understanding, if I just get in my Tesla and drive to Seattle and all of a sudden I'm in Centralia or in Olympia without anywhere to turn, I have to call a tow truck or I have to go rent a car with gas, I've now mapped poorly, right? So understanding the destination is always going to be key. Now, where are you going once you have the destination figured out? What are the channels in which you're going to share your message? What are the channels in which you're going to share your business abilities and accentuate what you can do for your audience? Where are they? Right? You're going to decide what the appropriate platforms are in order for you to broadcast your message. And that could be a myriad of things. It could be anything from you appearing on local television or a podcast to you disseminating direct mail. And then, of course, conduct a SWOT analysis. What are the things that you're really good at? What are the things that need some work? Where are your opportunities? And then what are potential hazards for you within your business? Identifying them always helps you to stay on top of what potentially is happening and what can happen next. I should have done a SWOT analysis before I started this presentation. I would have understood which screen was going to share when I said share screen. However, I digress. Now, this is that all of these things allow you to invest in your tomorrow. Running a business is a marathon. It's not a sprint. There's very few things. I mean, unless you catch lightning in a bottle, which happens very rarely, there are very few things that are going to take off with immediacy. And so you have to take one step at a time in order to make sure that you're achieving these long-term goals by hitting your short-term destinations, and then remain consistent. And don't be afraid, again, to take a look at something when something's not working well, but also don't be afraid to take a look at something when something is working well. By all means, persevere. Let's open up the floor. I feel like I've talked for a ton. Do we have any questions?
Will, I have a question for you. My name's Toby. Thanks so much for being our host today, or our speaker today. You mentioned about that the big guy's not your competition,
Yes.
but they're so ubiquitous, right? That you have to look at them. And so can you talk just a little bit more about how, why you feel like they're not our competition, and maybe what they are to us as small business owners if they're not competition?
Yes. Toby, thank you. That's a great question. And thank you for the welcome as well. The big guys aren't your competition because their budgets are just far too enormous to allow you to compete at the same level. Now, what they are is a beacon. What they can be is a shining, egregious example of something that you can aspire to. But when you're competing, when your small business is competing with a business that can afford a $360,000 30-second commercial on Monday Night Football, that is not your competition, right? Unless of course if you're making if you can afford 360,000 on just one channel of marketing, then great. But for the most part, you're here in your backyard in your local area, and you're not going to put that amount of money. The rule of thumb is 20%. 20% of your net should go towards your marketing. And now how you split that up determines on what is right for your business. So do you take that 20% and roll the dice and say, hey, I'm going to go all digital marketing? Or do you say, hey, I'm going to spend some here, I'm going to spend some here, I'm going to spend some time, right? What are the things that you're going to do with that 20%? And then what is your net that allows? If you're making $100,000 a year, you're talking about $20,000 in marketing. And so where does that 20K go? So, but what they can do is show you like, oh, okay, you can pick them apart. Who are they speaking to? Are they speaking to a general audience? Did they hit the mark? Right? Did their messaging drive you to any sort of emotive state where you agree or disagree and understood what their goal was? As an 8-year-old, I got into this business. Well, I was exposed to this business because I was going to basketball practice and looked up and saw a billboard with a bunch of guys standing around a puddle. It was from the knees down. It was in sepia, so it was kind of dark and the contrast was high. And there's a bunch of guys with baggy jeans on, and I could tell they were men because the jeans were huge and the shoes were huge, the boots were huge, and they were loosely tied construction boots that were synonymous to the culture, to hip hop. But the words were so foreign, it was clear the person who wrote the words had no understanding of the culture. And so those two things didn't resonate. So now Timberland is a big business. They're a global brand. They make a ton of money. They can afford to put billboards in Times Square and everywhere else. But when the messaging doesn't click, who's the audience? So I look at them and say, okay, they're a big brand, they're a big business. However, they're missing the mark. Mm-hmm. Now I go back and say, hey, what can I do to make sure that I don't miss the mark? Let me understand who my audience is. Let's drill down and start talking to my audience and say, hey, what resonates with you? And how can I begin to resonate with you? How can I begin to create this level of authenticity and transparency between you and I so that you understand I'm here for you?
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, wouldn't you agree that, once you do have the marketing set up, monitor it, see which one's working the best for you, and then adjust it, accordingly to, hey, this one's making me a lot of business. Okay, well, let's focus over there. Kind of talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely, Kevin. It's so important to make sure. It's easy to poke holes or point out like, oh, there's a dent in the car. Oh, there's a hole in the boat. But are you willing to point out where the boat can be improved when there are no dents, when there are no holes? How can I become more efficient? Tesla said, hey, you know what? We're going to recess the door handles. We're going to become more aerodynamic by reducing drag. And so now you look around and you see Kia's done it and Land Rover's done it, right? And so now you're starting to see everyone who's taken this thing that was part of the DeLorean only probably and Ferrari and see these different aspects of what's happening. And because there's always a want or a need to improve and to get better. Sometimes you don't need to improve, you just need to maintain. But in order to maintain, you have to be aware. So setting a SWOT analysis, running a monthly SWOT or a quarterly SWOT, right? Of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to see where you are, to see what's working. I know when I work with clients, I like to we have weekly or bi-weekly check-ins. But the one thing that you have to do is allow some time to breathe, right? You, as a small business owner, you are a farmer. And your job is to make sure you till the soil. And once you till the soil, you then plant the crops. And once you plant the crops, then you water the crops. And now you have to manage everything to make sure your crops are growing, to make sure the weather hasn't frozen your seeds, to make sure the gerbils or the moles haven't eaten your seeds, right? You have to do all of these things to maintain until you have a harvest. And then when you have a harvest, you say, okay, this was great. What do we do right? Can we replicate this and do it again? And you start the process over. And that's what being a small business owner is. It's maintaining constantly what your degree of practice is and the success rate as well as the failures in order to either replicate or avoid.
Will, we had a couple folks that asked if you could show the last slide again.
Ooh, pressure. Where'd it go? Okay.
And while you're doing that, can you explain the difference between marketing and advertising? Because I know a lot of folks don't understand that marketing isn't always about an ad. So what are some other forms of marketing that you can use that aren't advertising?
Betty, great question. I love that question. I love that question. And we've had this conversation many, many times. Advertising is the ability to take your message and broadcast it through other channels. Marketing is the concept and the idea in which you create that message and determine what the channels are that your message is going to be broadcasted upon or on, right? So advertising, billboards, banners, social media, anything web, television, newspapers, right? Anything where you say, or even the what's new, right? So marketing is the overall concept of, okay, here's our message. This is what we're going to determine our audience to be, and how best are we going to reach them? We're going to reach them through advertising. So marketing is the concept of the strategy in itself. It's the blueprint in which you say, okay, we're going to build this house. Advertising are the tools in which you use to build the house. And I saw Matt Stockso here. So talking about architects and right, Matt creates a blueprint. Matt isn't building the house per se. He's not the one, but he's creating the blueprint, the plan, the structure in which is the most efficient way to build this house. The materials that are going to be used, the tools that are going to be used, potentially even the direction it faces. And then other tradespersons come in and they say, okay, we're going to use a hammer to put this nail in. We're going to use a bolt, a screw. We're going to use a saw. We're going to use these things in order to build the structure of said house. And of course, it showcased the wrong one.
Appreciate the shout out, of course, Will. And I've got a question to throw back at you. For those that are in the service industry, right? Whether it's taxes, architecture, realty, things where we don't have a product necessarily, but the service where we have an industry baseline, right? every accountant should be able to accomplish the same things at a baseline. Same thing with an architect. We all know codes, but so then the thing that would differentiate us may be our process or the experience of working with us. And Krishna, how do you, is the balance of just saying, hey, we're good at what we do, but then we're good at how we do it? I guess, how do you balance out promoting or marketing your process versus just what the baseline is for your industry?
Great question. And I'll separate it into two. I'll break it down a little bit more. So service and product are almost one and the same thing. Your service is your product, right? Your ability to perform. So for massage therapists, it's going to be a little bit difficult because it's a one-on-one experience. And so that's word of mouth, right? But with that word of mouth becomes this idea and the concept of getting people to understand. Now, that's when you flip the IP, the intellectual property, is when you start talking about what is important to your audience. So if I'm a massage therapist and I know I have a specialty in prenatal massage, I'm going to show imagery and talk about things with women. And I'm using someone as an example, obviously, because it's not me. I'm not the expert in prenatal massage, but but I'm going to show things that appeal to my audience who has a necessity for that. Now, they may not know they have that need until I show that I understand. Once I show understanding, then it begins to build confidence in my audience. But it's my job to make sure I find out where that red thread is. Now, products and service in terms of your industry, for you, right? You have the beauty of the after. You can show imagery of the things that you've lent your pen to and say, hey, here are my finished projects. Then you can talk about your ability to understand margin, cost benefit analysis, to work with a manager or a four-person, I don't want to say four, is it four-person correct? Right? To work with a general contractor who says, okay, I want to work with Matt because Matt is going to increase my bottom line. Money is everything, right? Matt is going to make me more money. He's going to get the project done. Not only is he going to get it done well, but he's going to get it on time. He's going to get it done on budget. And he's even going to save me some money where I get to pad my pocket a little bit. Now, for you, it's up to you in your messaging to start to share that information. You can show all day, hey, here's a house that we built, or here's this commercial property we built, and we came in, we had an X, Y, and Z budget, and we came in on time and even saved the owner X amount of dollars. Now on to the next one, right? And so that's what I mean when I say understanding your audience and appealing to their belief in you being able to satisfy their need, right? Them understanding you are the person to help satisfy what their need and they trusting you to have and do so.
Hey, Will, I got a question for you. So as we all know, as business owners, from about 2020 to the end of last year, basically our big COVID time, right? And a lot of businesses had, some unwisely cut their marketing budgets during that time, but income and revenue was lower for most businesses during that time. But we also and then some also had to pivot. So now going into 2023, what are you seeing some things what are you projecting businesses need to do to successfully market themselves or be profitable in 2023, as far as however they look at their marketing plan based on current situations with us somewhat coming out of COVID, with the economy somewhat opening up, even though we have inflation and all of that going on. But what are some things that businesses did to survive in 2020 to 2022 that now there's something different that they can do going forward in 2023 with their marketing plan, or something to boost their bottom line?
Of course, to Tony with the tough question. Love it. No, it's a great question, and it's super relevant. You know as well as I do, the number one thing business owners need to do is create the plan, right? And just because you cut your marketing budget, or because you're building a marketing plan, does not mean you need to do everything all at once. You don't need to take $40,000, $80,000 and say, okay, I'm going to hit all of social media marketing, I'm going to hit all of my digital marketing, I'm going to hit all of my out of home marketing. I'm going to do, right? You don't need to do all of those things, but you need to do something. So the one thing you can do, number one, is invest in employee number 2. Make sure employee number 2 is up and running and able to convert visitors to your website. Yes, you can use LinkedIn and Facebook and everything else to bring awareness, but those aren't transactional platforms. Those aren't transaction platforms. And I think Instagram is starting to create such, but you want to make sure when you invite people to your house, they're coming home, right? You don't say, hey, why don't you come over for dinner and then meet someone at a restaurant? That's not your house. Why don't you come over for dinner and you're welcoming people into your home, because this is where you're going to do your best work. So when people get to your home, you want to make sure your living room is tidy. You want to make sure your bathrooms are clean. You want to make sure there's toilet tissue on the roll, right? Or soap in the dispenser and a hand towel. You don't want people walking out of your bathroom just shaking their hands or wiping their hands on the drapes. So you make sure that when you're planning for your marketing in your business, that you take care of the one thing that can actually do the work for you, hand over fist, right? Evergreen opportunities. My website is going to make sure this person gets on my calendar. My website is going to make sure I get this information via lead gen. My website is going to make sure they purchased my item. Whatever the case may be, my website has to do the work and has to do the heavy lifting. Now, as I go out and say, okay, that's taken care of, what's next? Where do I go next in order to drive traffic to my website in order for my employee number 2 to do my job, right? And you start tiering your ability to market your business. And as you start tiering your ability to market your business, now you're building on top of one on top of the other. And then pretty soon, things are working in accordance, right? You're crawling before you walk. You're walking before you run. Pretty soon you're running and you're able to do karaoke's and run backwards and all the things, because you've built on the foundation of the thing that's most important and most necessary. If you go out and market and say, hey, come do business with me. The only time that I can do business is if I see you in Safeway and say, hey, don't you do X, Y, and Z? Let me have your card. As opposed to, hey, let me go to the website. Oh yeah, the Safe Media. Oh my goodness, this is exactly what I needed. I probably don't, it's already tiered for me. Let me take the basic plan and let me start there, because I've gone to the Safe since Tony and the Safe Media has said, here's exactly what you need. I understand your needs. I have the ability for you to do so. Here's how you get started. And now I'm working. Now my website is working for me. Now I'm going to take the next step. And for Tony, the next step is now doing the business and then moving forward. Great question.
So Will, can you give maybe an example of how you've helped the business with a marketing plan and showed some excellent results by doing so?
Woo! Absolutely. So Henry, that question comes up more often than not, and it's always the the grasping at straws to figure out the example. I tell you what, I'm working with a client now. Oh no, I'll give you an example of a past client. Past client, educator, speaker, great individual. He has a platform. His platform is educational performance, right? He's here, he wants to mold schools into a new method of teaching in order to get kids to understand how to be more progressive and more efficient and more assertive. And while we worked together, it was building a plan of how to execute. He was thinking, of course, all right, if I go to this conference across the country in California, he was on the East Coast. If I go to this conference across the country, I'm able to go and sell my t-shirts. And so once I leave there, people buy my t-shirts, they run around and they got my message. Hopefully they'll buy my book. He's an author as well. Well, once he leaves that conference, those people go away and then there was no transaction from there, right? Other than supporting him on social media. And so what we worked on was controlling owning your local audience. He had two young children who were in school. One was school age, the other one was preschool. So we started, start with your daughter's class. Each kid, if there are 20 kids in your daughter's class, there are 40 parents potentially, right? 40 individuals whom you can speak to. Those 40 individuals that you bring together are going to help this educational component of even your educational platform that you're teaching, because it's not just for schools, it's also for parents. So now you have an audience of 40. Well, inviting the child's teacher, and now you're at 40, 41, 42. Now you take that and say, okay, how many classes are in the second grade? Are there 2 classes? Are there 3 classes? So now you've doubled by 2. Now it's elementary school, right? So always thinking upon scaling, talking to that person, talking to then not only the teacher, but then the principal. Then from the principal to the administrative board, where you're now taking care of all the schools in the district. Now you go from the district to the city, go from the city to the state, and then so on, right? So for him, it was a matter of scaling his business to the tune of thinking about the channels in which he operates in order to evangelize his message and broaden his message to capture a wider audience, but on a tiered system, building it out. Eventually, what ended up happening, of course, is he was able to find success, not only with the speaking engagement, still taking them, but now affecting his backyard where people are readily doing business with him at home. And so there was less of a need for him to go on the road, even though the payday might have been a little sweeter, but it took him away from his family. He was very family oriented. It took him away from his family and it helped him center on owning his backyard. Once he owned his backyard, that changed his payout. That changed the consistency of his payout. As opposed to a conference maybe once a quarter, he's now doing business. He's now having smaller conferences, local conferences, if you will, more intimate conferences, 3 times a month.
All right, folks, we're winding down. Any last final questions for Will?
I have a question for Will.
All right.
So let's see if this question makes sense. So for small businesses that provide a service like to homeowners, like we go to them, they don't come to us. So like HVAC stuff, for example, and you provide it to multiple counties, not just Hillsborough, like what would be some considerations when you're thinking of your marketing plan, right? Like, should we focus first in our community, which for me would be Hillsborough, or do you differentiate? Like, what are some things to consider?
So, yes, if I'm understanding your HVAC company, what are some things to consider in terms of evangelizing your marketing?
Yeah, specifically like how do we prioritize certain counties over others, or like do you put more money into one than to the other, or market out broadly? Does that make sense?
So I would start with the bottom line in numbers, right? I'll answer your question anecdotally or analogously. If you market to a county that's further away, what does that do to your margin? That vehicle now has to drive. You have transportation that transportation that you have to account for, right? You have to account for mileage. You have to account for gas. You have to account for the time it takes for your employee to get to that county, which reduces your bottom line. It reduces your margin. You can't charge. I mean, ideally, you could charge more in a further county than you can in a local county. But what happens if you're working with commercial businesses who have different businesses in different counties? So I would absolutely conduct a SWOT analysis. What is the cost benefit analysis of operating within neighboring county versus distant counties? I would build from there and say, okay, now what are the opportunities for us to do business centrally, extended, and then even further? If I go to a distant county, how many jobs am I able to do in a day? Right. So I would compile all of this information and start looking at what makes the most sense towards our bottom line. Once we've done that, now what are the greater opportunities based on what we do? If we're in HVAC and we're getting into one of these older communities that don't have central heat or air, is that an opportunity for us? Is that an opportunity for us to install? Do we install? Or am I going to manage the county that I am? So it's not an apples to apples answer, obviously, because there are so many factors that go into weighing whether or not it makes sense. But it's about sitting down, doing the due diligence to understand all of the opportunities that are there and all of the threats that are potentially there as well, and then kind of weighing them against one another and saying, okay, here's where the opportunity exists for us to be most profitable until we build towards going that next step, that next level. Or do we need to adjust in order to get to that next level while offering it simultaneously? Does that answer your question?
All right, let's give it up virtually for Will Eberhardt. Thank you so much, Will. Really appreciate the engagement that you brought and the opportunity to participate in this conversation, and really appreciate your time that you took to prepare and come before us and be a part of the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure. I am happy to be of help and of service, and humbly appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Well, and I would also say that another important aspect of marketing is saying that you're willing to come onto a program like this and participate and share your expertise. Am I right, Will?
Absolutely. The more the merrier, right? If you can get in front of anyone else's audience, it's only going to do you a favor.
And I know that Will's contact information has been put into the chat by Titonian. Thank you very much, Titonian. Be sure everyone to save the chat so you've got that information. And when you're scratching your head trying to figure out your marketing plan, now you know who to call. So again, thank you so much, Will. I want to thank our 2023 Small Business Solutions Series workshop sponsor, Jake Mead with American Family Insurance. Really appreciate that. I'm going to let you in on a little bit of a secret today, so thank you for coming here. There's a gift with purchase. Our next program for the Small Business Solutions Series will be February 15th at 10 o'clock right here, where we're going to be launching our new aspect of the Small Business Solutions Series workshops called Eavesdrop. And this is an opportunity for you to join us and listen in while we have an in-depth conversation with small business owners, and we learn about their challenges, their opportunities, how they got started, what their hopes and dreams are, a little advice maybe for those seasoned veterans that have been around and have dealt with maybe a potential recession or downturn in the market, giving you some advice. So be sure and join us. Our first program will feature Tyler Giel and Evan Aldretti, who are the co-owners of Insomnia Coffee, and you will learn how they started out with 1 coffee shop and now have 6. So looking forward to you joining us then. And if you're interested in being a part of the Small Business Entrepreneurial Council, we would always welcome your participation. We meet on a monthly basis and it's all virtual, so it's pretty easy and convenient. Just send me a little email and say, I want to join. You can even just come by and try it out, listen in, and see if it's something that's a good fit for you. So we would welcome everyone to participate and be a part of that conversation. Want to thank you all for being a part of our program today. Again, thank you, Will. Really appreciate it, and wishing you all a great day and enjoying this, as a New Yorker put it, our liquid sunshine. So thank you so much.